Mary Kay Cabot was on with Baskin and Phelps today, and she spoke about the latest around Dillon Gabriel. Here we go.
They are saying that Dillon has an opportunity to come in and also compete for the starting job. And I think they kind of probably don't love the fact that maybe, we have kind of written Dillon off, basically. So they're trying to say, no, that's premature. He's still on the roster. I think that it's not customary for a player to be coming in the offseason unless you are coming off of an injury and you need to be here for treatment and rehab and those kinds of things. There's nothing wrong with Dillon not being here, but I do think that there was a bit of contrast between, Monken not meeting Dillon Gabriel yet and Shedeur spending a bunch of time this offseason in Cleveland, getting to know Todd, buying him a horse's head for his birthday.
I do buy into that. And by the way, I'll put it on the front of it. I think the 5 minutes we spend talking about Dillon Gabriel is the most I hope to spend talking about Dillon Gabriel in the next 3 months. I hope he's so far removed from this quarterback competition that he's not being an afterthought is what I want Dillon Gabriel to be, which is what he's been essentially since he got benched or since he lost his job last year.
I'm hoping he ends up in Atlanta or somewhere else.
That's the ideal scenario. He's just off the team and we can just kind of forget about him. Why is it that there's an insistence that we treat Dillon Gabriel the same way we're treating Shador Sanders and Deshaun Watson?
Because he's a third-round pick.
Is there something redeemable about, in your eye? There's no way there's something redeemable. You're the guy that, and I was right there with you, but you're the guy in training camp last year.
Then why are you asking me this question? Wow. If you know my answer.
Well, sometimes you got to ask the questions in order to get to the answer in my own head, okay? In order to figure it out for myself.
The answer you're looking for is no.
All right.
No.
Asked and answered, I guess.
No. Although sarcastically, and I stress sarcastically, I have joked I'd rather watch Dillon Gabriel play quarterback for the Browns than Deshaun Watson.
Well, and so that is part of this equation because you're not the only person that has said that. I got in not a fight, whatever it was, with Nick Padone yesterday because Nick was going down that same thing that you're saying right now. He was doing the anybody but Deshaun category, and it's like I don't think you guys really believe it when you say anybody but Deshaun because anybody but Deshaun includes Dillon Gabriel.
If I end up saying Dillon Gabriel, then I clearly mean it because, But no, I don't think. Listen, I don't think starting quarterback is for Dillon Gabriel. I think he can be a quality backup if you have to start him in a pinch or something like that. But if you have to start him for an extended time, you're just asking for what you're about to get. He's a good kid. I have nothing bad to say about him personally. I have, people thought I had like some axe to grind against him or whatever. No, I'm basing it off what I saw with my own 4 eyes in training camp and the offseason program. And that is they were treating this guy like he was a first-round pick by giving him these first-team reps and preparing him to be a starter this year. And I just couldn't take it seriously.
Yeah, I couldn't either. That was part of the problem. And the insistence that he was being so much better than Shador Sanders, as you're watching, as I'm watching, we're at training camp and watching none of this go well, was one of the more maddening exercises of my life.
I mean, there were drills where like he was struggling to keep complete passes on air.
I know. And then we were telling everybody what was going on. And again, Nick and I were at training camp watching him. I'll never forget it. We were talking to Bernie Kosar, and I was interrupted in the interview with Bernie because so many balls just kept hitting the ground. And it was like, I can't believe how many incomplete passes he's having against air in this session. And I wanted to not seem like the biggest hater in the building, but the reality was we could only scream it so loud that he looked awful. And I remember we had my buddy Sean Salisbury on at one point, and Sean knows quarterbacks, and Sean taught me more about football than anybody in life, okay? And so I really trust what Sean has to say. And the only thing Sean could come up with in regards to Dillon Gabriel was that maybe he's a gamer. And I remember thinking about that, and I really took that to heart, that idea of like maybe he's just a gamer. Maybe he's one of these guys that sucks it up in practice, but the lights go on, and then it's just a different story. Because Dillon Gabriel in college could play, Daryl.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He could play. I don't trust.
But you know what? You know how many quarterbacks that could play in college that just couldn't do it in the NFL?
I don't trust short quarterbacks is a big thing that I have.
There
I like
Heisman
bigger
Trophy
quarterbacks.
winners that don't make it.
Of course there are. Like it is part of it. But if like there was a segment of people that were holding on to that. And by the time you get to that being how you rationalize that, you're so far up a creek you don't stand a chance.
Right.
Like when you're rationalizing the idea of what we're seeing in practice isn't real because maybe he's a gamer, you've already lost the cause. You're in a race you're never going to win if that's your argument, because all you're trying to do is justify why it's not all adding up.
Yeah.
And I feel badly for Dillon in many ways. I do wish he was at least here trying to put in some of the same work that Shedeur is putting in, but I'm sure he sees that as a wasted effort. I'm sure he sees that as a lost cause. He'd rather work out with his own trainers in Hawaii with his own people, and then whatever future team he goes to, then he can go and try to impress them from there.
Yeah, 100%.
It is what it is.
Yeah, right now I think Shedeur knows he has to impress Todd Monken. He has to impress the front office. He has to impress ownership based on what happened last year, right? Not only going through the draft process, but also when he was buried fourth on the depth chart, and to show everyone that he's taking this thing seriously. And I'm not saying he wasn't taking it seriously last year, but like he wasn't put in a position to take it seriously last year either, right? Mm-hmm. He was so down on the depth. I mean, they were having him. They didn't even give him the courtesy of throwing to wide receivers during training camp, during the individual drills, because they ran out of those guys. Okay, he had to throw to the ball boys on air and coaches on air for his reps during those sessions. So, like, I like the fact that he's been in the building a lot, that he's trying to demonstrate his commitment to this. Unfortunately, because the rules prohibit it, they can't do a lot of football with him right now. Todd Monken can't hand him a playbook, can't talk football with him. Okay. You're just basically allowed to go in and say hi. He can go to the weight room and work out on his own, or go to the indoor and work out on his own. Like, there's no coordination with the team allowed whatsoever and all that. And I love that he's doing everything that he is. And the same thing with Deshaun. Like, it's never an effort thing with Deshaun. It's never a, putting in the work thing with Deshaun. Not by any stretch of the imagination. It's how much gas is left in that tank after that car's been smashed to bits over the last couple of years. And so, when it comes to Gabriel, I just, again, I think he is a backup. And the only reason I think that the Browns are talking about him being in the competition, if you will, right, is they're just trying to be fair to this kid. They're
just being nice.
Yeah. They're just trying to be nice about it. But let's be honest about it. This ultimately, right now as we talk, it's a two-man competition between Deshaun Watson and Shador Sanders, and you flip a coin as to who's going to be QB1 when this whole offseason program stuff gets going.